Season 6, we're back again. Kristi and Katie, your crime time friends. Stories, justice, laughs collide. True Crime Squad, come join the ride. Grab the clues, let's take a stand. For victims' voices, hand in hand. True Crime Squad, it's time to shine. Season 6, your turn, your time. True Crime Squad, where justice meets hilarity.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the True Crime Squad. I'm Kristi Brower, here with my sister, co-host, and partner in crime, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello. Put
How's
yourself
it
on
going?
screen a little early there.
Well, yes. So we had this interview that we recorded this morning that we're going to be sharing with you. And I took off our intro for the recording.
Right.
And then I forgot to put it back on. I'm waiting, and it says you're live. And I'm like, oh, so I just click on, and then I realize it didn't play the intro. What the hell am I doing right now? I do not know.
Just a typical Tuesday.
It is just a typical Tuesday. You all know I am famous for hitting the wrong button. Anyway, how are you?
I'm good. Good. Got a bunch of new glass, so I've been trying to get it all
Oh my gosh.
sorted and organized and put away. And I have
And
2 kilns
another
running right
kiln?
now. Yes, and another kiln, a littler kiln. Yeah, my glass dreams are all just coming true. What can I say? But
They really are. I think it's so cool.
2 kilns that are both winding down that have just gone through cycles. So I'm excited to open kilns. That's always the Christmas morning part, or the worst
Right?
nightmare. We'll see. I've peeked at
Right?
both of them. I think they're both fine, but
Definitely a Schrodinger's cat kind of situation, isn't it?
oh, it is. Yeah, you just don't know. But anyway, yeah, I am well. How are you?
I am well as well. We have the funnest thing for you guys today. It's something very
We
different,
do.
something we don't normally do, but we did in this case. And, I think we'll probably do more of these because this was really fun.
Hmm.
You may recall over a year ago now, we did a segment on the murder of Holly Bobo.
Hmm.
And this is a really sad case. There's some really interesting legal things going on with it right now because it was a case that everyone thought was settled. Perps in prison, boom, we're done. And then some things came to light that might change that, at least for one defendant.
Hmm.
So,
The main defendant. Yeah.
the main defendant, yes. So we got offered the opportunity to interview Eva Pilgrim, whom you may have seen on 2020 or other big news, ABC
Hmm.
news stations, because Eva is doing a deep dive podcast into the Holly Bobo case, where it began and then moving into where it is now. And that podcast actually came out today. It's out there on all your favorite podcast platforms. And we were really happy to talk with Eva about where she's at with this. It was really fun to interview her about it.
Hmm.
So we're going to start it off today with Katie. You're going to share with us just kind of the bones of the Holly Bobo case.
Yeah. So Holly Bobo was a nursing student. She lived in Darden, Tennessee. She was 20 years old. And in the morning of April 13th, 2011, she was seen, a neighbor heard a scream, and then her brother saw her entering the woods with a man in camouflage. That's kind of where the story starts. And then there was a huge manhunt for Holly. Their community came out big searching for her. Darden, Tennessee is about 2,500 people. It's a small place where everybody knows each other, a pretty sleepy place. And they looked and they looked and they looked and they looked and they could not find her. They found a few of her belongings. They did not find Holly. Not until September of 2014 was her body was found in northern Decatur County. She wasn't very far from her home, actually. Uh, somebody that was hunting ginseng found her. Uh, and her death was ruled a homicide via gunshot to the back of the head. Throughout their prosecution, they did 6 different men were arrested. 2 eventually weren't charged. There were 3 that were convicted, and 1 that actually took their own life amongst those 6. And that was in 2017 that they finally managed to, get some convictions and get some people in prison, including Jason Autry, who was the star witness for the state. You're going to tell us more about Jason Autry, but he is really the key to putting Zach in prison, who is considered to be the main perp. And that's kind of where it's at. So now, as we know, this case is in jeopardy, and the Bobo family, I would imagine, is feeling a lot of things right now. There's a lot happening. So talk to us a little bit about Zach and Jason Autry.
Well, I'm going to do that at the end. So I think we'll listen
Okay.
to the interview, and then I'll kind of give you guys a little bit of a legal update about where we're at.
Perfect.
But first, we'd like to share, we got permission from ABC to share the trailer for this new podcast. So let's do that.
Nearly 15 years ago, a young nursing student disappeared from her home in Tennessee. What followed was a years-long search for her.
An army of volunteers have searched every day for the missing 20-year-old nursing student on foot and on four-wheelers, hoping to find a sign.
And a heartbreaking journey for Holly's family, who would never see her alive again. The search for Holly became the search for Holly's killer and one of the biggest investigations in Tennessee history. Investigators start finding answers bit by bit, and even though the case is now considered solved and closed, for some the question of what happened to Holly Bobo remains to this day.
There's been so many rumors and so much misinformation. You don't know what's true and what's not true.
I don't believe either one of them was capable of killing somebody.
And the first time I interviewed him, I was like, oh my God, this guy did it.
From ABC Audio and 2020, What Happened to Holly Bobo follows the winding paths through the woods of Tennessee and the twists and turns of a case that continues to haunt to this day. What Happened to Holly Bobo? Coming May 6th.
A little bit about yourself. I see that I'm just on the it's Bad Click Tuesday, because I didn't mean to click that quite yet. However, that is the trailer for the new podcast that Eva Pilgrim is hosting. It's out everywhere. I actually listened to the first episode today after we interviewed her. It's very good. One really cool thing is that because this is so far back, they were able to get the entire case file, all of it, every bit of the evidence, all of the recorded stuff. Plus, they have family interviews and all different kinds of things. And so this is going to be really fascinating. So now let's hear from Eva. She has done a lot of work on this case, and it's exciting.
Yes.
And, we love to be able to deep dive cases, but we can't do them all. So we are happy to help other people who are doing the ones we cannot also do. So with no further ado, here is our interview with Eva Pilgrim, covering a couple of cases that we know rather intimately. Alec Murdaugh and George Floyd, which have been 2 big cases for us as well on the podcast side of things. We're not news, we're not journalists, but so tell us a little bit about your experiences covering crime and where you've been and what you've done.
So I started off working in local news. So I was like exactly what you think of as a crime beat reporter. I would go down to the police station, I would pull all the reports for the day, have my conversations with the street officers, the captains, the higher ranking officers that still have offices like in the main police station for some of the bigger departments that I worked with. And so, just that run of the mill sort of everyday routine of covering local crime wherever it was that I lived. and wherever it was that I worked. And so then once I got to the network, I had a good understanding of how the process plays out. And so it became a very natural fit for me to cover these kinds of bigger cases that get a lot of attention, and because I understood the legal, the law enforcement process and the legal process from covering it in local news. And I cover stuff just like I always covered it. The same questions that I asked, the same trying to figure out who's the person that's going to give me the most real answer and be honest with me, no matter what case that I'm covering. And those people aren't always the ones that end up on TV, but I have a lot of respect for the heart and soul that they pour into these jobs to, bring justice. And so that's how I approach most of these cases that I end up covering. Alec Murdaugh, I'm from South Carolina. So
are you? Oh my goodness. Okay.
So we got the call about that case. Well, first I should say the boat crash. I'm sure you guys have talked about the boat crash.
Sure, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was the kind of thing that my uncle sent me a newspaper link to, because he was always warning us as kids to be careful driving boats. So I had been following that case just for my own reasons to see what was going on. And then when the double homicide happened, I got a tip literally that night. And I sent an email to GMA, to 2020 in the overnight hours. Guys, I think this is a case we're going to want to follow. We were in South Carolina. We were the first network crew there. And really before even a lot of the local affiliates had covered it, because of my connection to the state. Our team who covered that story, many people from South Carolina, you would be surprised the number of people who work at ABC News that are from South Carolina. We were all there and using our connections in the state of South Carolina to dig into what was going on and dispel some of the rumors about what was happening. And because we're journalists, we really have to hold ourselves to, this is 100% fact. We cannot deal in rumors. And so, in a case like that, it's really hard because there's a lot of rumors floating around.
Oh,
so
many in that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are local to the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, Doomsday Mom case. That's our big case. We've done over 200 episodes on that case because we are local to the first 3 murders. And we've spent years dispelling rumors about that particular case because we had local sources and, knew local things. And so I totally get that man, you go look at like the Facebook comments or, the Twitter comments on any of these kinds of big cases, and there's all kinds of stuff that is definitely not fact. And we really pride ourselves in staying with fact. We don't do the rumor stuff, but I know how hard it is when you're a local and, like that everybody's got a little stake in a case like that.
Or
like
all the hot goss. Yeah, for sure.
Well, even for us, like, dispelling, figuring out what's fact and what's fiction, who's your trusted source, that stuff's difficult.
Totally.
Definitely. Yeah.
It is so much. Well, and I saw that you did coverage of George Floyd's murder as well.
Yes,
and that was something we do a lot of racial injustice focused content. And so I was very curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, we were, I was there on the ground in St. Paul and in Minneapolis during that time. It was like Philando Castile happened right before that, and then George Floyd happened. Yes. And I was there for both of those cases, out at night watching to see what was going on, talking to members of the community as they were trying to calm people. We were there in front of that shop for many, many days. And that neighborhood's a really interesting neighborhood. That's the neighbors are like such lovely people, and they were trying to do so much to sort of calm everyone down. There's a church right across the street from where that grocery store is. And they were out there every day trying to speak to people and speak to their heart and the hurting, and, both for the people who lost their property, but also for the people who felt like they had lost a member of their community and a loved one. Sure. And so it those are the kind of cases I think that stay with you. It's bigger
certainly.
than who you are or one story that you're covering. It's talking about a moment, a cultural moment, recognizing each other type of moment. So,
For sure. Wow. Well, the reason that you're here is to talk to us about Holly Bobo's murder. Tell us a little bit about what led you to, this is a big update on Holly Bobo, and we covered her briefly a year or more ago. It was a case that we felt like we needed to revisit, and then we got this cool opportunity to meet you and revisit it. So what brought you to do an update on this case?
So there were some things that happened in the case. There was the star witness for the state recanted his confession, which then sent into motion a bunch of other things that have since occurred. And so we were tasked with figuring out what was going on. And so my producer, Nora, and I, who you guys saw just a moment ago, went to Tennessee to talk to people to see where things stood, how things had changed, if things had changed, and sort of where the case was at this moment. You know, there was, at this point, there's a conviction. A jury has, given a conviction. There was a trial. They made their decision, and there's a man in prison serving time for killing Holly Bobo. We talked to him as well on the phone. We were able to get him on the phone and have a conversation with him, and then listen to this interview, this audio recording of a recantation from Jason Autry, who was the state's star witness. So that was sort of where we started. We hadn't really have any expectation of this was going to be anything more than sort of an update. We were just kind of following what we knew. At this stage, we were also able to get our hands on the entire case file. So we just did our due diligence and started digging through, little bit by little bit. The file is huge. There is so much in this case file. So we have a big team of people who've been working on it, and everyone just sort of, divides and conquers and goes through it bit by bit and shares. We have a group text, shares what you're finding, where to look, how to find it. Because you do have to give a little bit of directions as to like where to click, or it's in here, that kind of stuff. So we were trying to sort of sort through all of that as well. And what's interesting about these case files is you get to see what investigators knew when, exactly what evidence they have. Not everything at a trial, everything in the case file is presented at trial. So it's really interesting to be able to go through and just figure out what did they know that we didn't know.
For sure. Oh, that's fascinating. In a case that already has a conviction that is now back up with new information, that is not something that happens very often.
No, definitely not. And I think that's a big part of how we were able to get our hands on the case file was, I don't know that people thought that this was going to be anything more, I think a lot of people thought this had been put to bed. They didn't expect the recantation. So.
Right. Well, the conviction was in 2017, right?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while.
It's been quite a while.
This case is so complicated, and there's been a lot of misinformation around Holly Bobo and her death. Where do you think that came from?
Well, I mean, I grew up in a small town. So I think you have to recognize that this part of Tennessee, it is very much a small town, right? Everyone knows everybody. Everyone has their theory about what happened and who did it. And not all the theories are the same. And that little game of telephone often leads to misinformation being out there. Also, the way that things can be perceived, right? One person sees something and they perceive it to be, might not be how it was intended or how someone else would perceive it. And so for us with this podcast, what we really wanted to do was give the listeners the ability to, let's take you through, step by step, really dig into it and let you decide what you think, right? We can show you what's available. You can decide how that sits with you and if what we're seeing now makes sense.
Sure.
I think it's one of those things you sort of have to leave the rumors to the side and also explain how those rumors came about. I think especially in a case that takes this amount of time to solve, the rumor mill becomes even more rampant because
Yeah.
everyone wants an answer. And I think ultimately that's what I think most of these people had good intentions in their speculation, but at the end of the day, there's a family that wanted justice and they needed justice.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of what we were hoping to do was to dispel those rumors and give people all the facts that we had access to.
Mhm.
For sure. For sure. And it is fascinating with small towns because it's like one person can say something and then all of a sudden, especially with social media, then it just becomes fact. Like now everyone is repeating it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think
Especially
that
when they don't
happens
have an
so
answer,
often in
right?
cases like that. Yeah.
I mean, this case, they
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
have an answer. They didn't have a suspect. There was not an arrest. There was no body for years,
What, 3
right? And so
years? Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
trying to figure out what happened and
Well, and
they want to solve it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a town of 2,500.
Yeah, it's a very small town.
So I can only imagine how terrifying and unsafe people must have felt, or terrified and unsafe people must have felt when this happened. And then for it to drag on as long as it did, and then for her body to be found, like in a really small community like that, I'm sure everyone felt a little suspicious of each other and of, just not knowing how safe they were in their own front yard. It, I can only fathom, how people just needed an answer, needed something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the entire
Sure.
community. And
Mhm.
and when you look at the response to her being missing,
Hmm.
everyone turned up. I mean, that's one of the most
Yeah.
incredible parts of this case was that within moments, the search that existed for her was so huge for such a small community. I mean, that was
Hmm.
part of why it was so crazy that they couldn't find her and didn't
Yes.
have
Yeah.
an arrest was that everyone was helping.
Hmm.
And what was interesting is so many of the people who were involved in the case in those early days, they were part of the search before they even knew what their role was going to be in this case long
Yeah.
term. That was just what people do in that
Hmm.
kind of place. They show up, they help their neighbors. Everyone was hoping for a happy ending and that Holly would be okay. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, that's not what
course.
happened.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I was just refreshing on, this case over the weekend that the neighbor that heard the scream, he called his mom, who called Holly's mom, who called Holly's brother. Like the phone tree that was happening in the neighborhood was just, and it was
Yeah.
immediate. Yeah, it's actually really amazing in
Right.
comparison to, other cases that we've followed that none of those responses happened. People didn't care. They didn't
Right.
do anything. But yeah, it's amazing the way their community responded and reacted. Yeah.
Right. It's the kind of community where you have the cell phone number for your neighbor.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I was thinking exactly that.
I don't have the cell phone
Yeah.
numbers for my neighbors, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild. That is wild. So we know that her body was found 3 years after the fact. What forensic evidence was available at that point to the police?
So this is one of the things that we explore in the podcast. So we know there was blood found there in the carport at the family's home.
Yeah.
There was a handprint. There was a footprint. As far as other forensic evidence, that was pretty much it.
Right.
There is other forensic evidence that is explored about hairs that were found that we talk about, uh, but not any other conclusive information that ties that forensic evidence to an actual person. And I think
Sure.
that's what's interesting about this case and about any case where there's, circumstantial type evidence or you're depending on eyewitness testimony. People like evidence to be tied up in a nice little bow, but
Yeah.
that's just not how real life happens. And that's not how crimes
No.
happen in real life. And so oftentimes this is what investigators and prosecutors are given to make sense of. And so there's not a ton of forensic evidence in this case.
Yeah.
And I think that's what part of what has fueled the rumor mill.
Sure. Well, for a body to be exposed for 3 years, of course there's nothing, but well, you'd hope there's something, but yeah, I mean, typically there's not. Uh, yeah.
Well, and it's not like
How?
CSI, like where
Right.
Well, and
there's
what's
there's
interesting
DNA and there's fingerprints and there's hairs and there's everything,
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way, really.
it doesn't always work that way. And what's interesting, so we went to Holly's parents' house. I know where it's located. It's not in an obvious place. Like GPS didn't really help us. Like you have to know where you're going. There's not street signs, right? So, and then from Holly's parents' house to where her body was found, it's kind of tucked in behind a cell phone tower there, but like right along the interstate. So not a super hidden place either, even though it was like tucked into these woods. It was very close to access to where people could have been, and found by that ginseng hunter. So it just like doesn't, none of that makes a whole lot of sense either.
That was the question I had for you is do investigators believe she was there all along? Or do they just not know?
We've heard mixed things. One of the early investigators who mapped out the cell phone, that was the location that her body would have been at that time, like very beginning when he mapped out the cell phones. That's where he expected her to have been found. So possibly, but they don't know. They don't know if she was there or if she was moved and then brought there. That's one of those questions that still lingers.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because to think that they didn't find her in all that time, you'd think, but who knows too.
Yeah.
So as far as suspects in this case, and we know, Zach is in prison for this case, what were her connections to anyone that the police looked at?
Well, I mean, they all lived in this small town. So in, small towns, you're just a degree or two removed from each other.
Sure.
I believe, for instance, like Zach Adams was in Holly Bobo's mother's class at school. She was a school teacher. So, and a couple of the guys are like cousins, and one of the guys, a distant cousin to Holly, but they're all kind of like separated. They didn't interact with each other that often. They knew of each other, which I feel like is a thing people from small towns would understand, right? You don't necessarily know someone, but you know of them, you know who they're related to, kind of thing.
Probably know someone they dated. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
their
their uncle, like, oh, I know that last name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly. And so
but she didn't run in their circle. They weren't that kind of close.
No, with any of the guys and any of the suspects.
So one question, because we want to get back to the fact that you have a podcast on this case. Does your podcast explore the evidence that was key in Zach's conviction, and then what's going on with his current appeal?
Yes, so it does explore the evidence that was key in the conviction, what they presented in court, the trial. We do go through the trial as well, and as well as what Jason Autry has to say about it all, who was basically the star witness for the state. And we also are looking at what's happening now, some of the evidence that has come forward. Zach Adams' attorney has filed several things as of late into the court system about possible evidence that they are exploring and looking at that should be a part of his hearing. So that's coming up. So, we're going to look at all of those things as well. So there was a lot in this case file that even for 2020 that has existed that we weren't able to get to. Interrogation audio, polygraph audio, things like that were saved, but you've never heard before because, we really had a chance to dig through it all. And a podcast lends itself to being able to hear those things, whereas
Right.
you're not as constricted. 2 hours sounds like a lot, but it's really not a lot. So a
No.
podcast is very
Oh,
helpful to
no,
be able to.
because those videos like that, the audio like that, those are hours and hours and hours long, many of them. Like,
Mhm.
wow. But it's so cool. It's so awesome that you're like, after the fact, able to get the entire case file because it's been adjudicated. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
because boy,
to be able to
we,
go through
we're
it.
like scraping for any little thing we can get on a current case.
Right.
Totally different to go backwards and be able to really look
Mhm.
at it. That's fascinating.
Right.
From that angle. Yeah.
I'm really excited to hear your podcast and to hear that information because those things are so key. Like you said, the police know so much that the public never even hears.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the public has never heard. And that's the hard work that police and investigators do, is dig through all of this stuff. And then what we see at trial is what they think is the most useful to help for a jury or for a defense. And that's what you get. But there's oftentimes many, many more hours worth of work that have been used
Oh, for
to get to
sure.
that point.
Well, and then of course the never-ending battle over what evidence are we going to allow in and what evidence will, be disallowed. And sometimes that's big stuff, and for various legal reasons it doesn't make it in that the jury would probably be dumbfounded to know. Yeah.
There's no way to know how this stuff would impact a jury, right? Because
Yeah.
the jury that is assembled is the one that makes the decision, and what they are told is what they are told. But with the gift of time and being able to look at it, I think the goal with the podcast is to dispel the rumors that are swirling out there and to really make people think about the question, which is why we named the podcast what we did. What happened to Holly Bobo? Do we know?
Yeah. Does
and let
that
people
answer
decide.
even exist?
Mhm.
That's so interesting.
Right.
And I'm fascinated. Does Jason Autry give you an answer of why he did what he did?
He in his own words says the reason that he told the story he told was to save himself. He says that very explicitly.
Is he out of prison yet?
He will not be out of prison anytime soon. He's in prison on other charges. He was out of prison on these charges pretty much shortly after all this, but went back to prison on different charges.
On other things. Okay.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. Where do you think this case is going to go, just from what you've seen?
I have no idea. And I don't pretend to have any kind of crystal ball that tells us where it could go. I think there's a lot left to be determined. I think there are questions that a judge is going to have to answer about what, if this even warrants being brought back into court. And I think depending on what the judge's decision on that is, we will see what happens next. But there's a lot of questions still, I think. And that was why we were so interested in doing something more on this.
For sure. Because this is not, there's no clear answer right now. I don't think so either. That
I think the fact that you say there's no clear answer is part of it, right? That people feel like, wait, is this it? Is this all? And I think for the sake of the family, that the public narrative should be, yes, we have an answer, right? There should be a definite justice. And I think the family feels that justice has been served. And so to have this sort of lingering idea out there, I would imagine is very hurtful and harmful for them. And so anything that can be done to make that, give them a definitive answer, I think is important.
For sure, where they thought they had one. And then I can't imagine being that family and going, wait a minute, we thought this was done. We thought this was settled.
I think they do think it's done. I think they want it to be settled and to be over with.
And of course, who wouldn't?
Right.
No, I mean, it just prolongs their nightmare. for these things to keep going back into court for now, this recanting of testimony, all of these things. Oh, yeah, I have an immense amount of compassion for them because it, it never ends. And that's what we see so often with these cases, especially death penalty cases, where the appeals just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and the family just can't ever, get breathing room from it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm sad to see for the Bobos that this is where this is at. And yet at the same time, obviously, we want the justice system to work correctly, and we certainly don't want innocent people in prison if that were to be the case. And it's hard. It's hard to know, how to feel about stuff like this. But I think that journalists like you doing your due diligence help to move along the justice system in your own way. And
Most
obviously,
definitely.
there's a robust defense going on here, and there was a robust investigation. So, they're all
The
going to come
most
to a head again.
the most expensive investigation in Tennessee Bureau history.
Wow.
Wow, I did not know that. That's
Hmm.
fascinating.
This was a case that everyone wanted solved.
Sure.
For sure.
So
Well, and I think that you make a
Yeah.
really good point that we always have to come back to the family.
Yes.
This is justice for them. This has to be settled for them. That's much more important than anybody else's interest in what's happening. Is for them to have some peace.
mhm. Yeah, this family has been through a lot. I mean, you have to remember in the early days of this case, Clint Bobo, their son, was one of the suspects for a while.
That's right.
And the lingering sort of questions that hung over him and that family for so long before his name was cleared. And even now, still, if you go into town, people will randomly bring that up as well.
Yeah.
He was cleared. And every investigator I've spoken to believes him. They believe he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
So, and they've told us that independent of each other. They
Sure.
believe Clint Bobo had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
But that's hard, on top
That
of
is
losing
hard.
your daughter, then your son, and then the speculation. And then it just, now this is happening again. That family has been through a lot.
A lot. And the whole
Yeah.
community, the fractures in the community that just cannot heal with
Mhm.
Well, and I have a ton
all
of
of this coming
compassion for
up.
Clint. Gosh, just to
yeah.
even have been, seen as a potential suspect of your own sister. That's got to be horrifying.
As part of
Well,
the
and it being the
podcast,
witness as well. I mean, he was the first witness, besides the neighbor hearing the scream. I mean, there's a lot on his shoulders. Yeah.
in the podcast, you hear a polygraph test that he took. And at the kind of towards the end of the polygraph, he talks to the person administering it, and he mentions how he knows people judge him for not doing something more in that moment. But he didn't know he needed to do something more. And he talks about that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear in his own words sort of what he was personally grappling with.
hmm
And that was early days. That's one of the polygraphs he took very early in.
Sure.
So
Well, because he thought the assailant was her fiance initially, correct?
he thought it was her boyfriend, and then he thought maybe it was their cousin, and he had just woken up, so he was
Yeah.
a bit confused. The dog woke him up, or his mom called him. He was confused about how he was woken up when you look back at, but he was woken up out of a sleep.
Yeah.
So he wasn't really fully aware of what was going on, it seems, and that something bad was happening to his sister, because surely if something bad was happening to his sister, he would have done something. He just didn't
Right.
understand that
Well,
something
it's
bad was happening.
the last thing you expect. This has been an ongoing conversation around the Koberger case, the Brian Koberger case, or the Moscow Four murders, that the roommate that saw Koberger or the suspect in the hall and then went to bed. And there was some text between her and the other roommate, and they all went to bed and didn't get up until late in the morning the next day. And, people have slaughtered that poor girl on the internet because she didn't call the police right then. She didn't do anything. And I kind of think the same thing about her. Like in the moment, she didn't expect that there was a bad guy in their house murdering people. She had no idea what was
Right.
going on, and she didn't have the presence of mind in that moment to think that something nefarious was happening. And I was thinking about that when I was reading Clint's experience too, thinking you don't think that that's what's happening. It's not the first place your brain may go in the
Especially when you're
moment.
at home and where
Yes.
they
Yeah.
lived, particularly. I think,
Yes.
again, you wouldn't have been there unless you knew where you were. It wasn't a
Yeah.
place you accidentally, wasn't off a main
No.
road. It's really tucked away up there.
Mhm.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine the sense of safety they would have had at that time
Sure.
For
at
sure. And I mean,
home.
we're Idahoans too. I mean, it's like that everywhere. A lot of people still don't even lock their houses in this state. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But, like, yeah, your first thought is not someone's in my house killing my roommates. That's for sure.
Yeah, or in my yard doing something terrible to my sister. Yeah, none of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Though it has become the world we're in, and maybe people do need to think that way a little bit stronger, but that's kind of sad too. Uh, your first
It is.
episode drops today, correct?
Yeah, it is out there
That's
now.
so exciting.
Yeah, and the
Wow.
first episode is the day of the crime, is the day
Uh-huh.
Holly went missing. So we start right at the very beginning,
I love
Good.
that.
and try to paint the picture of where this was, what happened, and how it all starts. I think it's important for people to understand as they look at this case.
Definitely.
hmm
Definitely. So tell our listeners, where can they find your podcast?
It's anywhere you get a podcast. It's on Apple, on Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcasts, you should be able to find it. It is out now, and there'll be a new episode every week for 6 weeks on Tuesdays.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay.
And it is called What Happened to Holly Bobo?
What happened to Holly Bobo? Yep, that's the question we were exploring.
All right. Well, Eva, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to get to talk to you, and we love updates in old cases. We do a weekly update show where we update every time there's something new in a new case, in an old case. So I think this is really fun. We appreciate you being here with us, and encourage all of our listeners to go and listen to What Happened to Holly Bobo, because I'm fascinated to hear all of these things from the case files that you have now that the public has never heard.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how people respond to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am too. What to hear it all, hindsight, what really is the impression now? That's very cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for joining us here on True Crime Squad, and we look forward to following you and all the updates in the Holly Bobo case.
Thank you guys so
Absolutely.
much for having me.
You're
Our
so very
honor.
welcome.
Absolutely.
And we're back. It's so weird. I'm still wearing the same shirt. You changed.
I did.
I thought, is that good continuity or is that not good continuity? I don't know.
I don't think it matters at all. But yeah, that
But
was
isn't
great. It
Eva
was super
awesome?
fun. She was so
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
And so interesting what's happening now. So what's happened now is that Jason Autry, who is actually one of the men who was charged in this case, has come forward to say that the evidence that he gave in exchange for a plea deal was a lie. And that evidence was that he was present when Zach Adams shot and killed Holly Bobo and helped bury her body. He gave very specific details. So what happened is they gave him a major reduced sentence for this testimony in Zach Adams' case. He was given 8 years. He only served 3 and was out. And was only out for like 2 months before he was hit with federal weapons charges and was sentenced to another 19 years in prison. So that's where he is right now. But he now says that he lied about his testimony. He also says that in the discovery for his own trial, he used the cell phone GPS data to make up a story based on his locations so that it would appear
Credible.
very true. It
Mhm.
matches his cell phone location data. There's not a lot of other evidence against Zach except for some things that he himself has said since he's been when he was in jail.
Yeah.
This is not a case where there's DNA or fingerprints or really obvious things. It's all quite circumstantial. And so it weighed heavily, Zach's case weighed very heavily on Jason Autry's testimony.
Yeah.
And now he's saying he was just trying to avoid life in prison, that his attorney told him right before his trial began that he was 95% sure he would be convicted and given life.
Yeah.
And so, as you heard Eva say, he made up a story based on the trial discovery that he had that checked all the boxes, fit all the locations that they already had,
Mhm.
and made up the story, and that it is not true.
And so we don't know. Was he lying then or is he lying now?
Right. That's a tough road. So for Zach Adams to get a new trial, he has to prove that what he has is new evidence. So just the recanting of the evidence is not actually enough. And he's been denied a new trial once already. But he's back at it. The courts have appointed him a public defender. They did that in March. And there's a big evidentiary hearing coming up where they're going to hear quite a few things.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to see, like, do they have any evidence now to back up the claim that Jason Autry has made that he made that story up?
Right.
They're going to need it. They've got to have something that proves new evidence in the case that is significant enough for a judge to warrant a new trial.
Yeah. Yeah. And there
We
is a
don't know.
5-day hearing coming right up here in
Yeah.
May.
Yeah. So we will be keeping a close eye on that and keeping you up to date on it, as I'm sure will Eva on her podcast. I don't know. It was denied once and they've come back now again. And it is not the only thing at issue. There are some other things at issue. Some blood evidence that was assumed to be from Holly that was actually not ever DNA tested. There's some questions about that. There's also some evaluations of Zach Adams. There's a bunch of different things. But will this be enough to get him a new trial? We don't know.
Right.
Yeah, as Eva told us, Holly's family wants this to be over.
Sure.
Which I completely get. But I think we also have to be sure that the people that are in prison are people who actually commit the crimes that they were accused of and convicted of. And this is one of those times where Jason Autry is obviously just a very self-serving human being.
Right.
Does this serve him some purpose now that is different from the purpose it served at the time that he gave that story?
Right.
I would not rush to trusting him, frankly.
No, definitely not.
Given his history. But it does make you wonder.
Well, and if the wrong person is in prison, then who did it?
Right.
I mean, who did do it? And are they just out living life right now? But this is a toughie. It's really hard.
It is. And the other part of this is that the other defendant, so there were 3 men that were actually convicted. The other defendant, his name is Dylan Adams. He's Zach's brother. And he is a person with a developmental disability. And he took an Alford plea in this case and was given 35 years in prison.
Yeah. Where does he lie in all of this?
Where does he lie in all of this? I think that's a big question as well. We know that of the 6 men that were initially suspected, one of them did take their own life.
Yeah. And 2 they were charged but never tried.
Never tried. Yeah. So there's a lot. And it it sucks. I feel bad for Holly's family. They're not happy that this is being drug up
it's
again.
horrible. Yeah.
I do have at least empathy for that. I can't imagine what it feels
Yeah.
like because I've not been through it, but I do have empathy for that. However, if there's any possibility that there's someone in prison who shouldn't be in prison,
It has to be
or
visited. Yeah.
it has to be revisited if the judge feels like it meets the legal criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to see what happens with that coming up later this month and see what all do they have. Right, Kristi, there's such a ripple effect with things like this. There is into their community. And then also just this, like to think that all these years later that someone could come back and say, oh, just kidding, I'm recanting my testimony.
Yeah.
And then throwing all this back into question again. Ugh.
Unbelievable. Yep.
Yeah. We just want to say all of our love to Holly's family.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine what you've been through and are still going through. And it is a very challenging part of our legal system that appeals can bring everything back up.
Mm-hmm.
And it may feel like this is never fully settled for them. And for that, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Very, very hard stuff. Yeah.
Jess says, this is semi the problem with pleas. He probably followed counsel's advice, who based it on everything else and recommended the plea due to things like the confession. Right. Yeah. It was certainly what they worked out to keep him from going to prison for life. But does it really mean that he lied about Zach Adams' involvement?
Right.
We'll see what the judge thinks. We'll see if they've got any evidence to back that up besides just Jason Autry's statement, because I'm not trusting that guy as far as I can throw him, and I can't throw him at all. So should be interesting. All righty. Well, that is what we've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. This was fun for us. Just something different.
Very different.
We get to do, and it's really nice to help out a fellow podcaster also. We're happy to make recommendations, and things to help other people grow, because we always know there's more room for true crime podcasters. We're not territorial. I don't think anybody else should be. There's room, and this is a big boat, and there's room for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely. So check it out over on Spotify or any of the podcast, the big apps. What Happened to Holly Bobo is what it's called. And I listened to the first episode today. It was great.
Yeah.
I'm very jealous of the access that they have to the entire case file. That is pretty amazing.
Huge.
All righty. Well, you know us. Today is Tuesday, so we will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, at 6 p.m. Mountain for case updates. I'm sure we have many to share. And then back again on Thursday for a regular show.
Yep.
Don't forget, you can interact with us in so many ways by going to truecrimesquad.com. We do have a couple of new Patreon episodes out over there. There's ways to tip us there. There's ways to get to the other things that Katie and I do. So that's a great place to find ways to connect with us a little bit more.
And our Discord.
Oh, yes, and our Discord. What am I? Yeah, and the link for the Discord is over there as well. You can join our Discord. It's very active. People are conversing in there every day. It's lovely. I love it.
I also did put a link to in our show notes to Eva's podcast, so you can find it there.
Oh, yeah, I did too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So you'll be able to find it. I put a link to the Spotify in there. Go check it out. All righty. Well, you know it. We are the True Crime Squad. Thanks for being here.
Take care.
Season 6, we're back again. Kristi and Katie, your crime time friends. Stories, justice, laughs collide. True Crime Squad, come join the ride. Grab the clues, let's take a stand. For victims' voices, hand in hand. True Crime Squad, it's time to shine. Season 6, your turn, your time. True Crime Squad, where justice meets hilarity.